Gerwyn Price wasn't just disliked, he became the most booed man in darts, and it all started with one match. How did a former rugby player turned world champion end up being the sport's biggest villain? This is the loud, aggressive rise and public backlash of Gerwyn Price. And whether you love him or hate him, you're about to find out why everyone had an opinion. Before the noise, the controversy, and the boos, Gerwyn Price was just another athlete trying to make a living. A former professional rugby player in Wales, he entered the sport late, bringing with him a level of intensity and physical presence the game hadn't seen before. And almost immediately, it showed. He played fast, he played loud, and unlike the quiet, focused pros around him, Price celebrated everything. Big shots, small shots, average visits. He clenched his fists. He roared after trebles. He stared down opponents like it was a rugby pitch. Some fans loved the passion, but traditionalists, they were horrified. In a sport built on respect and silence, Price felt like a sledgehammer in a snooker room. He was putting on a show, and not everyone wanted to see it. His rise was quick. By 2017, he was already reaching major televised finals, but his on-stage persona was beginning to divide opinion. The confidence, the aggression, the celebration after every leg. It wasn't just competitive spirit anymore, it looked personal, and that perception would soon explode in the most infamous match of his career. It was the Grand Slam of Darts, Wolverhampton, November of 2018. Gerwyn Price was playing the match of his life against Gary Anderson, a two-time world champion and one of the most respected figures in the sport. But it wasn't the quality of the darts that made headlines that night, it was the chaos. From the very first leg, Price made his presence known. Fist pumps, roaring celebrations, exaggerated reactions, even after modest shots. It wasn't just about scoring points, it was about rattling his opponent. And it worked. Anderson, a calm and focused player by nature, started to unravel. At one point, he physically shoved Price after another prolonged celebration.
Just refuses to buckle.
Now he did overstep the mark, because he's got in Anderson's face there for mine. There was contact made and it was initiated by Price. I don't think there's too much doubt about that way.
The tension wasn't just visible, it was radioactive. Despite the drama, Price won. He lifted the trophy that night, but the boos drowned out the applause. It wasn't just Gary Anderson who lost. In the eyes of many fans, darts had lost its class. The fallout was immediate. Price was fined £21,500 for his behaviour, not just for the final, but also for a fiery semi-final against Simon Whitlock. It was one of the biggest fines ever handed down by the Darts Regulation Authority. But the damage to his image, that was permanent. Even Price admitted it. Years later, he said, "I was lifting the trophy and getting booed, and it hasn't really stopped since."
It's all from that one game, innit? You know, years ago, 2018 Grand Slam final. And obviously things happened between me and Gary, and then I went and won the tournament. The crowd started booing, even when I was lifting the trophy up, and it hasn't really stopped since. It did calm down a little bit, but yeah, it's been hard work for the last 2.5, 3 years. Really.
From that match on, Price was no longer just a darts player. He was the villain, the pantomime bad guy, and the crowd made sure he heard it every single time he stepped on stage. If the Gary Anderson match lit the fuse, everything that came after was pure detonation. Gerwyn Price didn't just have one bust-up, he had a catalogue of them, each one adding fuel to the fire, each one cementing his status as the sport's most controversial figure. First, there was Corey Cadby. The two clashed in the World Series of Darts finals. Price shouted in Cadby's direction after nearly every throw, celebrating like he'd just won the entire tournament, leg after leg. When he finally sealed the win, he refused to make eye contact during the handshake.
To the next round. Well, that was a cursory handshake, wasn't it? Well, Cadby and Price serving up the entertainment, but it's Gerwyn Price who goes through in a dramatic last leg decider. Well, he's celebrating there as if he's won the event. A shake of the head from Corey Cadby. If you give it out, you've got to take it.
It was less sportsmanship, more gladiator pit. Then came Daryl Gurney, Premier League, Belfast. Tensions boiled over after a rough handshake turned into a full-blown verbal fight on stage. Referee George Noble and event security had to physically separate the two players. The handshake lasted seconds, the hostility still going, and who could forget Peter Wright? In a heated World Championship match, even before the match began, Price was talking big. He publicly claimed he'd win without dropping a set. "I don't think he wants to play me," he said in interviews. "Hopefully I can just smash him off the board." It was classic Price, confident, confrontational, and clearly trying to get in Wright's head. But Wright wasn't having it. From the first set, Wright answered with his own mind games. After winning the opener, he turned and playfully taunted Price. Nothing outrageous, just enough to irritate. And irritate it did. Price responded instantly. He let out a thunderous celebration, pumping his fists and yelling towards the crowd. But then came something no one expected. As Wright walked past him, Price leaned in and mimicked a headbutt gesture. Subtle, quick, but unmistakable.
Double 10. Yeah, there's a reaction there. He knows he's got away with one. He knows. Oh! There's the release. There's the release.
The crowd gasped. Commentators paused. It wasn't a full-blown physical altercation, but it was unnerving and wildly unprofessional. Things only got worse. Later in the match, Price began throwing his darts while Wright was still at the board, casually walking back from retrieving his own. One dart nearly struck him in the back of the head. Wright turned sharply, clearly rattled, but held it together. And when the match ended, no handshake, no eye contact, just two players walking off in opposite directions. Wright the victor, Price defeated in more ways than one. Afterward, Price claimed Wright had provoked him. He pointed to Wright's taunts and antics throughout the match as justification. In his own words, "I said to him, that's 1-1. If you're going to give it, I'll give it back." Eventually, the two exchanged messages and patched things up behind the scenes. But for fans watching at home, it was one of the most uncomfortable matches they'd ever witnessed. A World Championship semi-final that felt more like a schoolyard fight, mind games turned personal, and one man's on-stage persona threatening to ruin what should have been a historic moment. At this point, it wasn't just the crowd booing. It was fellow players talking behind his back and sometimes right to his face. James Wade, Glenn Durrant, Michael Van Gerwen, Adrian Lewis, Krzysztof Ratajski. Price refused to shake hands with each of them at various points, adding to the growing list of feuds and frosty finishes.
Spoke to Gerwyn Price in the build-up to the tournament. He says he thinks he's going to play you in the final and he wants to play the second best player in the world. I think that's a bit of mind game.
He's got one thing right, and that's playing me in the final, but the other thing is absolute nonsense. Absolutely. But we all know we all know he's full of himself, but deep in his heart he knows.
And just when you thought it couldn't get more tense, along came Kim Huybrechts. During their clash at the 2022 World Championship, the match boiled over. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and in a bizarre moment, Price appeared to step on Huybrechts' foot during an argument at the Oki. Referee Kirk Bevins had to intervene, separating the two.
Well, Kim Huybrechts not happy with Gerwyn Price. Oh! Not what you really want when the match is on the line like this now.
Well, it just shows what it means.
Price brushed it off after the match, saying Huybrechts had been giving it large first. It didn't help that he made no apologies. When asked about the confrontations, Price would often shrug them off. "If they give it, I'll give it back," he'd say. "If they can't take it, they shouldn't be up there."
What was that beef about on stage, Ger?
Oh, no, nothing. I mean, a couple of times he walked back and give it large as I'm going to throw, and I did it back to him. And, you know, I just said to him, I said, well, that's 1-1. So if you're going to do it to me and I'll do it to you, it's good enough to give, it's good enough to get. But, you know, it's one of those games, it was nip and tuck.
But darts wasn't boxing, and for many fans, Price was crossing the line again and again and again. By 2023, the boos were part of Gezzy's warm-up routine. Every time Price walked on stage, the chorus began. Jeers, whistles, taunts from all corners of the arena. It didn't matter if he was winning or losing. To many fans, he was public enemy #1, and the pressure was mounting. It all came to a head at the Alexandra Palace, quarterfinals, World Darts Championship. Price was trailing Gabriel Clemens by 3-1. The crowd was relentless. He wasn't just losing the match, he was losing control. Then, he came back from the break, wearing noise-cancelling headphones. Yes, headphones, on the biggest stage in darts. Fans stared in disbelief. Commentators tried to explain it. It was unprecedented. No player had ever worn them in a televised match.
Do we have a royal upset on our hands here at the Palace? Because Gerwyn Price is 2 sets down and he has come out after the break wearing those. Now, he had done an interview in the lead up to his match with Raymond van Barneveld, saying he'd been practicing with earplugs. And these aren't quite earplugs, are they? Have the crowd been getting to him? And it looks like he is going to play the 5th set wearing those.
Price claimed it was to block out the hostile crowd, to focus, to calm himself. And for a moment, it worked. He won the first leg with the headphones still on, but then he lost the set, and with it, his nerve. The headphones came off, his rhythm disappeared, and just like that, his World Championship run was over, defeated 5-1. After the match, Price took to Instagram with a message that stunned fans. He said he'd never play at Ali Pali again. The boos had broken him. The villain had finally snapped. To make matters worse, the PDC responded by banning the use of noise-cancelling headphones in future tournaments. What began as an act of self-preservation turned into a rule change that will be remembered for years. It was one of the strangest, most surreal moments in darts history. A former world champion reduced to wearing tech on stage just to block out the noise, not of his opponent's darts, but of the crowd that once cheered him. For some fans, it was laughable. For others, it was sad. But either way, it showed the truth behind the bravado. Gerwyn Price wasn't just facing his opponents anymore. He was fighting the entire room. After years of conflict and controversy, a strange question began to surface. Was Gerwyn Price really the villain? Or had he just been cast as one? From the outside, he looked like the ultimate disruptor. Loud, cocky, aggressive, the fist pumps, the roars, the stare downs. But if you asked Price, the answer was always the same: he wasn't the problem. In interview after interview, Price would deflect the criticism. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," he said. "I must be doing something right if people get this upset when they play me."
Seems to be happening every week. I don't know, I must be doing something right to upset a few people, and they just don't like it when they play me for some reason. I haven't got a clue.
At times, it almost sounded like he was proud of the hate, but behind the swagger was a more vulnerable truth. "He's actually very quiet off stage," said one commentator. "A nice guy, just focused." Others echoed it, friends, teammates, even rivals, saying that off the oche, Price was nothing like the aggressive presence fans saw during matches. So which version was real? Was he a misunderstood competitor who wore his heart on his sleeve, or a master manipulator who leaned into the villain role because it rattled opponents? Some fans started to feel conflicted. They hated the antics, sure, but they also admitted Price brought something darts desperately needed: energy, personality, fire. The same people who moaned about the sport being too boring were now booing its most explosive showman. There's irony in that.
I mean, sometimes the crowd's with me, sometimes they're against me. I mean, I don't care. You know, they're going to boo me, do what they want, but I'll keep winning. So happy days.
You keep winning, you're in the semi-final. Many congratulations.
The crowd wanted characters, but punished him for being one. Price, in many ways, became a victim of the very theatre he created. And the more he played up the role, the harder it became to walk it back. The booing didn't stop. The headlines didn't stop. And even when he won, he never got the love that came so easily to others. For all his trophies, Gerwyn Price was still walking on stage like he had something to prove. Not to his opponents, to everyone. For all the noise, for all the controversies, one thing has never been in question. Gerwyn Price can play. A former world #1, a world champion, a man with more major titles than most players could dream of. Even at his most hated, he kept winning, kept qualifying, kept climbing the rankings. He toned it down, slightly. The fist pumps weren't gone, but they were less aggressive. He still played with fire, but he didn't lean into the crowd as often. And with each passing season, his performances did the talking. You could hear it in the commentary too. Less criticism, more analysis. He's matured. He's learned to control the aggression. You have to respect what he's done, even if you don't like how he did it. But the scars are still there. There are venues where the booing hasn't stopped. Fans who still refuse to cheer for him. Opponents who still carry grudges. And when things get tense, the old Price, the loud, in-your-face agitator, still flickers through. Gerwyn Price never asked to be the hero. But somewhere along the way, he became the villain. And whether you see him as misunderstood or just plain arrogant, one thing's for sure. No one ignores Gerwyn Price. But he's not the only dart star with a darker side. Because before Price was even booed, Michael van Gerwen had already built a reputation as one of the most ruthless men in the sport. Mind games, intimidation, and accusations that shook the stage. Click here to uncover the dark side of Michael van Gerwen.